yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Born and dead, saved by love, count my blessings from above. Though in darkness, have no fear. Light will shine on those holding near. They know that sorrow they will pass. For I know in this life there will be something. But remember that love, yes it will. Love will reign. Yeah. Love will reign. Love will reign. Yeah. Love will reign. In my heart, I believe it. Love will reign. Love will reign. Oh, yeah. Love will reign. Yeah. Have a vision. It's clear and plain. People living life, smiling again. Oh, see the children, they know no pain. Far from pressure, stress and strain. Oh, sorrow, they will pass. For I know in this life there's gonna be some pain, but remember that love, yes it will. I know, yeah. Love will reign. Love will reign. Gotta believe it. Love will reign. In my heart, I truly believe. Love will reign. Sun will shine again, and love. I can hardly wait. When the light of love shines on us, we'll all be together. There'll be peace, peace, sweet peace. There'll be peace, happiness and joy forever. Oh. One day, someday, pain will be over and love will reign. They won't last, for I know in this life there's gonna be some pain. But in the end, love will reign. Love will reign. Said it in His word. Weeping may endure the night. Love will conquer all. Love will win the fight. So don't be discouraged. Don't be dismayed. The darkest hour just before the light. Hate will be crushed, fear will be gone, love will remain and go on and on. Though the road seems rough, my friend, we know how the journey ends. Oh, yeah. Love will reign. Love will reign.
Love will reign. I am Marcus Holmes, the love activist. I'm advocating for a better love for you and me and this world. And whether you're watching like Val Colbert Osamwady on Facebook or Betty on TikTok, or if you're on YouTube, Instagram, Twitch TV, or I think I said them all, LinkedIn Live tonight, I hope that you will click share as we come to the close of this month. We are 365 Black, but I wanted to take a moment to raise some concerns with you. And thank you, Bryant, for joining us. Click share and tag someone to join us, and to get you to thinking about this world, what's happening in our world, and what you and I can do about it, how we can up our love game for the cause of love and justice. So I hope you will click share and tag some folks to join us. There is replay content in tonight's live stream, of which there are some excerpts for which we do not own the rights, but we believe it is part of public domain and we're sharing it. But before we get there, I think you have probably heard, if you haven't seen, a flyer that has been going around, and I would be remiss if I didn't share, I believe, my 2 cents, as it were, about this flyer. Give me a like or love or heart or something if you've seen this flyer regarding Al Sharpton's DEI boycott plan, the 24-hour blackout to happen this Friday, February 28th, from 12 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. And he says this is the first step to counter the attack on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll talk about that in 1 second. Where he is calling for people not to make any purchases, not to shop online or in store. No Amazon, no Walmart, no Best Buy, no McDonald's and other fast food stores, no gas, no major retailers. Do not use credit or debit cards for non-essential spending. Try to buy all you need before Friday, February 28th, but if necessary, only buy essentials of absolutely necessary items such as food, medicine, emergency supplies. If you must spend, only support small local businesses. Why this matters, he says. Corporations and banks only care about their bottom line. Disrupting the economy for even one day sends a powerful message. If they don't listen, we make the next blackout longer. Our numbers are powerful. This is how we make history. Spread the message. Please share with all of your contacts. Talk about it, post about it, document your actions that day. We must use, I'm sorry, I got to take off my glasses. The power we do have in sending an economic message with our numbers, as did Dr. King. February 28th, the 24-hour economic blackout begins. And I don't know if you've seen that. And I want to share my take on it and encourage you to take a stand on it, whether you are a part of the African American diaspora or not. I want you to consider taking a stand on it. And I want to share some thoughts around why I've come to the conclusion that I have, which is let me first say, I have generous respect for for Al Sharpton, Reverend Sharpton. And I think this is laudable. I think this is a part of what I was talking about when we first began to celebrate nationally Juneteenth, that there has to be a strategy, a mobilization, that we have to come together. But there are some tweaks for me that are important to this blackout, and I'm going to share those. When we talk about DEI, as of course, as an HR practitioner, I'm always talking about DEIAB or DEAIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging. I add access because I think people impute access because of inclusiveness or equity. But really, access is being in the same room, being on the same level playing field, but the mindset shifts that the old boys network gives you access to the golf outing, gives you access to the CEO, just as anybody else would have. So you can be in the room, you can be at the table and not have access to the same resources, right? Equity means you're given the similar tools, but it doesn't mean that there's a mindset change about your access and those that are in charge, their awareness. But I want for a moment for you to look at it slightly differently. That I heard someone share just yesterday from the African Link Initiative that DEI really is it's the decolonization of our economic investment. That's what DEI is. The decolonization of our economic investment. So I think it is pretty important to take a stand. However, I don't believe that we should store up leading up to the day. That's number one. And I don't believe that we should not spend anything. I think we should only buy Black because there are Black businesses who rely on our patronage. So instead of that McDonald's, sorry, McDonald's, I love a Big Mac. But what about your local mom and pop shop who sells soul food or pizza? Instead of the Whole Foods and Walmarts, sorry, what about your local Black grocery store in your locale, even if you have to drive 20 minutes out of your way? Buy Black. Support those small Black businesses who rely on your patronage. But there are some things I want you to consider, and then we will go into the other part of the presentation. I want you to consider this. Some of this information is from Pew Research Center, which says that the total Black African American population in the United States is approximately 48.3 million people. Okay. The labor force participation rate, the Federal Reserve economic data says the participation rate, those that are actively working in between jobs because they've just left a job but they're seeking other employment or collecting some form of unemployment, is 62.5%. Okay. So 48.3 million Black folks, and 62.5% of them are in the labor force participating. That gives you a figure of about 30.2 million people that are working and earning some kind of living. Okay. Pew Research Center also says that the median household income is $54,000 per year. Okay. Which yields an estimated monthly income of about $4,500. Applying an estimated tax rate of 15% to that, based on IRS and BLS data, the monthly after-tax income is $3,825. Okay. Estimating, the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that the monthly household expenditures are $3,591. So we're talking not a large margin of what would be disposable income. And across different economic brackets, that then brings disposable income to about $200 to $1,500 per month. That's kind of the band. Okay. What if the people who got $200 or up to $1,500 decided that they were not going to spend $150? If 30 million people decided that, do you know that's $4.5 billion? $4.5 billion. And if a small fraction of that money was taken, say $50, on Monday, March the 3rd, and deposited in a Black-owned bank, that would be 1.5 billion dollars of economic power across Black-owned banks. I want you to give some thought to that. The kind of power, and as I talk about that, and I think about and looked up the 10 larger banks, Black-owned banks. Number one is City First Bank National Association, headquartered in Washington, D.C. Their total assets are approximately 1.2 billion. Did you hear what I said? 1.2 billion. Where if everybody put $50 in a bank, Black-owned bank, it's 1.5 billion, more than the largest Black-owned bank's assets. Liberty Bank and Trust, based in New Orleans, Louisiana, has just over $1 billion in assets with branches in 11 states. Again, 1.5 billion to 1 billion. Citizens Trust Bank in Atlanta, Georgia, has total assets of about $745 million. We're talking about double that, $1.5 billion. Carver Federal Savings Bank, based in New York City, New York, has a total assets of approximately $724 million. The 1.5 billion is more than twice that, right? Industrial Bank, headquartered in Washington, D.C., has total assets of approximately $713 million. 1.5 is more than 2 times that, right? One United Bank, I actually happen to have an account there, based in Boston, Massachusetts, with total assets of approximately $609 million. Almost 3 times less than the economic power that would be had from just $50, right? First Independence Bank, another bank that I do business with that's Black-owned and located here in Detroit, Michigan, has total assets around $546 million, which is 3 times smaller than that economic collective power. Mechanics and Farmers Bank, based in Durham, North Carolina, has total assets of $309 million, which is 5 times smaller than the 1.5 billion. And Broadway Federal Bank, located in Los Angeles, California, has total assets around $250 million, more than 6 times, right? Finally, United Bank of Philadelphia, based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, has total assets of approximately $200 million. What's the point that I'm raising? That I think we have to do more than just the step of don't spend in this list of places, store up. We have to then use our economic power and wield it. We have to mobilize and say, in our local communities, we're going to put our money in Black banks, and on that slip, you're going to write DEI. I'm here to decolonize the economic investment, because we need to get the attention of people who are taking African Americans for granted. Now, I know there are African Americans who are conservative and thinking that this is not for you. And I just want to challenge you to think whether or not there is any space in your ideology, in your principles, for alignment with Black first before you choose a party. The assault that we are seeing in this country is targeted at Black people. Not only Black people, but Black people are targeted. the executive orders that have been advanced, and thankfully, there are judges that understand the Constitution. And let's hope that when it gets to the Supreme Court, as I suspect it will, I expect it will, that they will understand the Constitution as well, at least as we do. But we are under attack. And these executive orders that have been proffered, wielded, these actions disproportionately impact African Americans, Black people, persons of color, and persons who worship and live differently than what the majority may say is appropriate. And I think that we can watch it like a bad movie, or we can stop buying the popcorn and the ticket to the movie and make a difference. I honor and respect Reverend Sharpton and the work that he has done and the work he does. I know and admire some people who are around him, immensely admire them. And I would say, look at your own convictions about what you feel that you should be doing. I know, and I try to, as often as I can, support small and Black businesses. I search them out for ways that I can support them. And not only me, other people that I know. And anybody that knows me know I love to connect people to great things and to great people and to great services. And I'm always trying to connect people to Black businesses, to small businesses. They are the bedrock, I believe, of our country. And so I don't want them to suffer economically, even if it's for one day. I want the money that somebody would spend at Target and somebody would spend at Walmart and someone would spend somewhere else. And even those creators that are on TikTok who have their own products, even those creators that are on various platforms that have their own products that are Black owned, support them instead of supporting others. Why? Because it's Black History Month. And we want you to understand some parts of history we cannot have repeating themselves. But who we are, hewn out of a mountain of coal and slavery and degradation and humiliation, and not only that, of brilliance and royalty and majesty, we're standing together in solidarity while we know that we are under attack in this country and in this world. And I challenge you, when you think about DEI over the next days, think about decolonizing your economic investment. And if you are so led and you are non-Black, non-African American, join us. I know many of you didn't join us at the polls. God bless your souls. But now is the time to put your money where your mouth is. And that is what I hope with my small, meager platform to encourage and inspire people to do, is to use your economic prowess, to use your economic power to make a difference. Okay? Having said that, if any of the statistics you'd like to have that information, inbox me across any of the platforms. I'll point you out to the links so that you can see for yourself. I really believe we're in a day and age where we have to check the information that's provided to us to ensure that it's not misinformation and disinformation, right? But if we just had the working labor force, that the people that are participating in the labor force, to say, as a celebration of Black history, in solidarity with all Black people, I'm spending only Black. The message that it would send. And I'm going to put my money, I'm going to invest in a Black-owned bank and let them know I'm investing today because I'm counting on you to help Black businesses, to help Black homeowners, to help Black first-time home buyers. I'm counting on you to use your assets to help us as we're investing in you. All right. I want to share a brief song here, and then I'm going to go into the replay. I'm not going to sing. I didn't mean that. I could, but I'm not going to sing. I have a wonderful colleague who is like my sister, like a younger sister. Her name is Carolyn Tribune Brewer, and she arranged a beautiful song that you may have heard before here in the Lemon Stuff community that I absolutely adore. And I want to share it with you now before we go into the replay content, and then I'll come back at the end just to close us out.
Keep your hand on that plow. Hold on, hold on, hold on. No one let me come in. Doors are fastened and the windows bent. Keep your hand on that plow and hold on. Hold on.
Noah said you done lost your track. Can't plow straight and keep looking back. Keep your hand on that plow and hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your hand on the plow and hold on.
Hold on.
Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crimes whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Hi, I'm Marcus Holmes, and we continue throughout this month to bring you Black History Month reflections, which will include some of the maybe not so positive moments in our Black history experience. And if we don't learn from them, we may be bound to repeat them. Those were the words of the transcript of the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that abolished slavery, or did it? Section 2 of that amendment says Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So I wanted to open this session with no music and just the mug shots of some of the early 19th century persons that were convicted and that were imprisoned in this system. Our Constitution's fourth article is devoted to the relations between the states and the Union. And Section 2 of that article sets forth 3 clauses, each of which concerns the movement of persons throughout the Union. The first of these, the Privileges and Immunities Clause, stipulates that the citizens of each state shall enjoy the privileges and immunities of citizens in the other states. Conversely, where the interstate traveler is a fugitive from criminal justice, the second provision, the Extradition Clause, requires the person's forcible rendition to the state where the alleged crime occurred. Finally, the Fugitive Slave Clause, which was effectively abolished by the 13th Amendment, extended this rule of coercive rendition to interstate fugitives from slavery, that is, fugitives from injustice. It says no person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall, in consequence of any law or regulation therein, be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party to whom such labor or service may be due. Before the Civil War, the Fugitive Slave Clause and the Privilege Immunities Clause occasioned intense national controversy. Americans disagreed about both the scope of these provisions and the degree to which the federal government had some implied power or duty to enforce them. These legal disputes in turn reflected deep political divisions on questions relative to slave ownership, race, and citizenship. So from the National Constitution Center, the third clause of Article 4, Section 2 is known, of course, as the Fugitive Clause. It's one of 5 clauses in the Constitution that dealt directly with slavery, although it doesn't use the word slave. It instead refers to persons held to service or labor. Compared to the Slave Trade Clause and the 3/5 Clause, the Fugitive Slave Clause occasioned very little debate at the time it was adopted, but fierce conflicts arose about its scope and enforcement in the decades that followed. The clause was adopted at the Constitutional Convention of 1787 on the motion of Pierce Butler and Charles Pinckney of South Carolina. In opposition, James Wilson of Pennsylvania disagreed because this would oblige the executive of the state to return fugitive slaves at the public's expense. The proposal was withdrawn, but then adopted a day later with no dispute. The only response recorded was Connecticut delegate Roger Sherman's sarcastic comment that he saw no more propriety in the public seizing and surrendering a slave or servant than a horse, unquote. At the end of the day, since the word slavery was never mentioned in the document, Northerners could argue that the Constitution did not recognize the legality of slavery. However, Southerners such as General Coltsworth Pinckney argued, we have obtained a right to recover our slaves in whatever part of America they may take refuge, which is at a right we had not had before, unquote. Ultimately, the issue of slavery's constitutional status was far from settled. At the heart of these antebellum controversies was a more fundamental disagreement. What is the relationship between slavery and the Constitution? Did the Constitution condone, support, and protect slavery, or was it silent on slavery's legality, allowing for the institution to just wither away in the future? Abolitionist Frederick Douglass held a minority viewpoint within anti-slavery politics based on a textual reading of the Constitution. Douglass argued that the Constitution made slavery illegitimate everywhere in the South as well as in the territories. He argued that the Constitution does not explicitly condone slavery, and the written Constitution should not be interpreted in light of a secret and unwritten understanding of its framers. Douglass believed that the federal government could abolish slavery because it violated the Fifth Amendment due process guarantee, the Article 4 guarantee of public republic government, and other clauses of the Constitution. He also made originalist arguments about the founders' intentions to have slavery gradually wither away. By this understanding, the Constitution had become corrupted by acquiescence and pro-slavery custom, but the Constitution's anti-slavery character could be redeemed by federal action. He also relied on a natural law interpretation of the Constitution, arguing that it should be read in conjunction with the Declaration of Independence and given the meaning that best expressed the ideals of the Declaration. Also from the Black perspectives, we're learning a lot these days about the historical roots of mass incarceration. Think about mass incarceration, where this amendment said that only in a certain context could someone actually be in some force of labor, that if they were duly convicted, that would be the loophole exception. Michelle Alexander's widely successful book, The New Jim Crow: Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness, now has a cinematic companion, Ava DuVernay's documentary, The 13th. That film's powerful overview of the crisis of mass incarceration from the Civil War to the present has earned its plaudits from critics, activists, and scholars. She refers, of course, to the 13th Amendment language in the documentary, argues that created this loophole that permitted the mass criminalization of Blackness that has defined the post-emancipation experience from Jim Crow to the prison industrial complex. And Senator Cory Booker says that there are more African Americans in prison than there were ever slaves. Is it a new slavery? The film argues that the central dependent clause of this article is the problem, that the country prohibited people from being deprived of their liberty, but with a critical exception. They could now be imprisoned, whether on chain gangs or in modern penitentiaries. The African American went, as the film states, from slave to criminal with one amendment. Many have adopted and extended this argument. One author commenting on the documentary calls the exception clause a poison pill, a trapdoor, an escape clause that permitted the persistence of slavery. That the 13th Amendment says slavery is still legal. Slavery is legal in prisons. The author says, you better wake up and see this conspiracy for what it is. The 2 million people incarcerated in America in 2015 are legally considered slaves under the Constitution, unquote. First, this loophole argument imputes to its framers and judicial interpreters a conspiracy against intentions of full equality that the amendment never included in the first place. All the 13th Amendment did was abolish slavery. It stood virtually moot on the meaning of freedom. Some say and argue this was by design. Anti-slavery legislators wanted a more comprehensive measure, but only by compromising on its vision would more conservative legislators let it pass. It took later amendments and laws to define freedom, right? The Civil Rights Act of 1866, the 14th Amendment of 1868, the 15th Amendment of 1870, and of course, many others. Second, on its face, the language of the 13th Amendment exceptions clause does not offer a mechanism to actively promote incarceration. Instead, its obvious purpose is to ensure that none mistake the prohibition on racial slavery for a prohibition on criminal incarceration. Given the novelty of emancipation at the origin of that phrase, that was not pointless. Surely the abolition of slavery would not mean that no one, Black or white, could ever be incarcerated for crimes they committed, right? The exception clause alone did nothing to promote racial oppression. Search in vain for legal cases in which the clause was used to argue for the legality of any form of punishment. Instead, we see the opposite, where the court used the clause to argue against deporting a Chinese woman because it would have returned her to a state slavery in China. Slavery and mass incarceration are not the same. All forms of racial oppression are not forms of slavery. Rather, slavery is one form of racial oppression. Mass incarceration is another. While it may help to end it by associating it with an institution we abolished, it's not the remnant of a barbaric and outmoded system, but the product of a modern society. The problem isn't the persistence of slavery. The problem is how a system that has always promised justice for all always seems to find ways to deny it for some. After the Civil War, new offenses like malicious mischief were vague and could be a felony or misdemeanor, depending on the supposed severity of the behavior. These laws sent more Black people to prison than ever before. And by the late 19th century, the country experienced its first prison boom. Legal scholar Michelle Alexander writes in her book, The New Jim Crow. After a brief period of progress during Reconstruction, she writes, African Americans found themselves once again virtually defensive. The criminal justice system was strategically employed to force African Americans back into a system of extreme repression and control, a tactic that will continue to prove successful for generations to come. States put prisoners to work through a practice called convict leasing, whereby white planters and industrialists leased prisoners to work for them. States and private businesses made money doing this, but prisoners didn't. This meant many Black prisoners found themselves living and working on plantations against their will and for no pay for decades after the Civil War. Like chattel slavery before it, convict leasing was brutal and inhumane. Across the country, tens of thousands of people, overwhelmingly Black, were leased by the state to plantation owners, privately owned railroad yards, coal mines, and road building chain gangs, and made to work under the whip from dusk till dawn, often as punishment for petty crimes such as vagrancy or theft, reports the Washington Post. Many prisoners died in these conditions. In July 2018, researcher Reginald Moore announced he found the remains of 95 Black prisoners who died working in Sugar Land, Texas in the early 20th century. Experts estimate their ages range from 14 to 70, meaning some of them would have been born in pre-Civil War slavery, freed, incarcerated, and then forced into unpaid labor again. More than 3,500 prisoners died in Texas between 1866 and 1912, the year Texas outlawed convict leasing because the death toll was too high. States also benefited and profited off of prison labor by forcing chain gangs to build roads and creating prison farms to grow crops like sugar and snap peas. Today, states and private companies still rely on prisoners performing free or extremely low-paid labor for them. For example, California saves up to $100 million a year, according to state corrections spokesperson Bill Sessa at the time, by recruiting incarcerated people as volunteers. I share with you another clip that reinforces this point, and I want you to give thought to it as we move into an era where we are holding a new president and vice president accountable regarding prison reform and regarding this loophole in the Constitution, which really does create the opportunity for mass incarceration, as has been said in many documentaries and many times before, as a form of racial oppression.
All right, later this month, Detroit Public Television will rebroadcast a One Detroit special that looks at the pathways that lead to prison. Here's a look at a segment of the program that focuses on the large prison population in this country.
Look how much African American communities have suffered. You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs.
You got a new prison industrial complex. Poor folk get caught. Drugs on the corner. But not one executive of a Wall Street bank goes to jail.
We know about the pipeline to prison. How do we stop this thing and turn it around?
You need more police. We need law and order.
The people in our prisons have made some mistakes, and sometimes big mistakes. They are also Americans.
I'm a Detroiter from the East Side, Cass Tech, class of '95. I like the line, "You can't move forward unless you know where we've been." Another native Detroiter and Cass Tech graduate, Heather Ann Thompson, knows where we've been too. She's a historian and can tell us how this pathway to prison got started. Mass incarceration. You hear a lot about it. Can you give us some perspective on what mass incarceration really is and why it should matter?
Well, at bottom, mass incarceration was a policy choice. It is something that this country embarked upon in 1965, deciding to handle all social ills, poverty, addiction, mental illness, and really low-level crimes, rather than through the social welfare system, through the criminal justice system. And what this meant was beginning a war on crime that was historically unprecedented. We'd never put those kinds of resources to this before. This is under the presidency of Lyndon Johnson. Johnson is responding to urban protests in cities like Philadelphia and communities like Harlem, by the way, all of which were rebelling against police brutality.
The policies provided more funding for police, ultimately putting more people behind bars. Mark Fancher of the ACLU's Racial Justice Project says, by the late 1960s, those policies and politics went hand in hand.
You also had something else going on, and that was the use of coded language by politicians. Richard Nixon campaigned on a slogan of law and order.
It's time for some honest talk about the problem of order in the United States. Let us always respect, as I do, our courts and those who serve on them, But let us also recognize that some of our courts, in their decisions, have gone too far in weakening the peace forces as against the criminal forces in this country.
And he exploited the reactions of the black community to oppression and to police violence to speak to largely white voters and to say that he was the candidate who was going to bring people back into line. He was going to calm down these insurrections. He never said that explicitly, but everybody knew what that meant when he talked about law and order.
And this is the house I grew up in. Look at it. It's destroyed. I actually grew up during the war on drugs at 6 Mile and Gratiot. My neighborhood literally changed overnight. Crack cocaine caught us off guard. It brought immediate violence, addiction, and misery.
The undeniable fact is that those who became addicted to crack were sick people. They were people who were in need of treatment and rehabilitation. This country chose to treat them as criminals.
So one of the greatest ironies about the drug war, just like with Prohibition in the 20s, when you make something illegal and people have no other resources to lean upon to feed their families, you have created a very, very dangerous economy.
Studies have demonstrated consistently that the rate of drug use among whites and people of color is essentially the same. But if you look, you see a huge disproportion with respect to people of color. And so it has been a very racially targeted campaign. The worst instances of it was the 100-to-1 disparity in sentencing for crack cocaine versus powder cocaine.
And Detroit was really ground zero, both for the drug war first and then the fallout from the drug war afterwards.
Ground zero. Prohibition lasted only 16 years. The war on drugs doesn't seem like it'll ever stop. As a result of running away from a broken home, Detroiter Shaka Senghor saw it firsthand.
I began to hang out with other broken boys that grew up in the neighborhood, and we kind of bonded around our brokenness.
Like many others, at the age of 15, Shaka took the only opportunity that he could see at the time, selling drugs. At 19, he killed a man.
In July 1991, on the night that I fired those fatal shots, what was going through my head in that moment was fear and survival. And when I went into prison, I walked in with all of the anger, the fears, the anxieties that I had accumulated while living my life on the streets. I blamed everybody except for myself, and ultimately, I found myself getting in a lot of trouble my first 5 years. I was one of the youngest persons sent to maximum security at the age of 19. I turned 20 in maximum security prison.
Shaka went to prison during the mass incarceration boom. After that, President Bill Clinton's crime bill ushered in a new era of mandatory minimums, ultimately hurting more African American families while helping fill penitentiaries.
It wasn't really about the fact that laws were being broken. It was about where the policing was where laws were being broken. So, for example, you had more white folks selling drugs and using drugs than black folks, but all the police were dispersed into mostly black and brown neighborhoods.
In the suburbs, you may have a group of affluent white youth who are relaxing in the large home, using some of the most exotic drugs imaginable, but you're not going to find police crashing down doors to try and get to these kids. You're not going to find police in suburban shopping malls stopping and frisking and patting down affluent white youth, even though they may be doing the exact same thing or worse than their counterparts in low-income communities of color.
So ultimately what this means is that the criminal justice system is way disproportionately filled with black and brown youth and eventually older people as they age through the system. And that sends a message to America, right? It just underscores this myth that somehow there's a connection between criminality and blackness.
I don't know that from day to day, prosecutors or even police or judges wake up with the idea that we're going to, lock up a lot of black people. I don't think that happens, but I do think that it has been so much a part of the country's historical agenda that now it has become essentially institutionalized.
There were people I knew who weren't bound to be criminals. They weren't violent offenders at all. But after serving time with the Department of Corrections, they emerged more hardened and more likely to fit the stereotypes some might feel unsafe being around. Shaka Senghor addresses that same mindset in his best-selling book, Righting My Wrongs, where the term corrections is a misnomer.
I was in solitary confinement a total of 7 years out of the 19 years that I served in prison. At one point, I was in solitary confinement for 4.5 years straight. And it is the most horrific and barbaric environment that I believe exists in American society. It's a secret society, clandestine if you will, and it's one of the greatest tragedies because the level of mental illness inside solitary confinement is astronomical.
Somehow Shaka came out with his mind intact, as well as a mission to tell his story as part of the movement for prison reform. While all this gives Heather Ann Thompson hope, she can't help but wonder if we might soon be heading in the wrong direction.
Now, I think it's really unclear where we're going to go. We have a new president who has routinely said that what we need is, to use his words, law and order. And it is deeply distressing to hear that. As a historian and as a Detroiter, those words were the words that touched off 40 years of devastating policies. We do not have a crime crisis right now. We have a crisis of poverty, we have a crisis of incarceration, and we have a crisis of violence in the most heavily incarcerated communities. The idea that we would need more of that we need more policing, that we need more prisons, just flies in the face of what every expert knows, what every mother with children in prison knows, what every child with a parent in prison knows. And so I worry for our next decade.
I wanted to play the entire resource so that you would know this are resources that we're using that are part of public domain, and we do not own the right to these resources. But I want you to consider in this moment of reflection whether or not the abolishment of slavery, the abolition of slavery, if you will, in the 13th Amendment really didn't speak to the unwritten part of the Constitution, the loophole, that really many have gained and profited from the service of labor, the restricting and oppression of people within prison. If you believe that if we don't learn from our history, we're doomed to repeat it, then you will, as a registered voter and an engaged person in our political system, demand for prison reform and demand for legislation that improves the rights of those that are impacted and experience the penal system, and that there is parity where we see such disparate treatment and disparate remedies. I'm Marcus Holmes. I am bringing you another Black History Moment. We are 365 Black, and we are grateful for a global world in which we live. But we wanted to highlight, as everyone just about is in this month of February, the history, the reflections, the excellence, and the sacrifices of African Americans and people of African descent. You know, I'm an HR professional, and you hear a lot, especially during these times, about what's called DEIB. I call it DEAIB. It's diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. But I say diversity, equity, access, inclusion, and belonging. I think people impute access or say that access is automatically a derivative of equity. And equity means that you put people on level playing field with all of the tools. But the reality is that if there is a room, an old boys room, an old boys network, whether or not you've been given level ground, the mindset of the room has not changed. You need access to that room to be able to bring your brilliance as an individual. And while it's true that many segments of our society, many demographics have been impacted, that the LGBTQIA has been impacted, that women have been impacted, that indigenous people have been impacted, African Americans by far have been impacted by a constitution whose framers did not intend to give them full citizenry, but hoped that slavery and its ills would wither away. Well, has it withered away? I wanted to share that replay because I think it's so important in this day and time as we reflect on history, understand history, embrace history, to determine that we won't repeat history. But there's so much happening in our world that's reminiscent of what we've experienced before. You and I have power, a voice, and I hope that you hear and feel a clarion call to use both. No, we didn't quite get out of this last election what many of us had hoped for, but we should not stop. We should not give up. We should mobilize and strategize to achieve the outcomes that we know that we deserve. I don't know that it will be easy, but it is something that we must do. We must keep our hands, as the song said, to the plow. I hope that as you continue to think about Black history, and there are amazing parts of Black history, and we'll continue because we are Black 365 to celebrate those. But I hope you will not forget. You will not forget these parts of history that we should intimately understand so that we can structure and strategize not to have them perpetrated upon us or repeated. You and I, and all of those within the African American diaspora, really are called to a new level of service, to serve in synergy with our collective, to right the wrongs that have happened in history. We do need allies to help us advance it, but if they won't come to the table, we must build our own. I hope that you will join those that have pledged to participate in the blackout on Friday. Again, my version of the blackout is slightly different than, with all due respect to Reverend Sharpton, because I believe you should buy Black every chance you get. Support Black business, support minority business, support small business. But on the 28th, in honor of Black History Month, support Black business, Black creators who have their own products. If you're going to purchase online, of course, we don't want the fees going to the credit card companies who aren't owned by us, right? But think of all of the opportunities, the Black grocers, the Black shoe shine, the Black barber. Think of all the Black beautician, the Black nail salon. Think of all of the opportunities, the Black gas station, right? Think of the opportunities that you can advance to support those that are Black. And then, as I shared at the outset, if just the 62.5% that's estimated of the labor force that is African American, which is 30.2 million people. If those 30.2 million people use just a small part of their disposable income, and for some people, you're saying I don't have a small part of disposable income. It's small. But if you say, this weekend I would spend $50, don't spend that $50 unless it's food and you're going to the soul food or you're going to a health food store that's Black owned. But take that $50 or a portion of it and start a business, an account rather, with a Black owned bank. I listed 10 of them, and there are many others. I just listed by assets the 10 larger banks. And then go in there on Monday and say, I am coming in here to open an account for DEI. And they say, DEI? So yes, I'm here to decolonize economic investment. And I'm counting on you, Black Bank, to lend to Black families who want homes, to lend to Black people who want businesses, to help them with lines of credits and products that will help them to accumulate wealth and to sell their products and to do business. That's why I'm investing with you today. And if we can just do that, what a statement, what a powerful statement. As I mentioned at the outset, that 30.2 million people putting aside a certain amount would be $4.5 billion in one day. Or if they took a smaller portion of that and put it in a bank, it will be $1.5 billion, which is more than the assets of any of the 10 banks that I've mentioned. We have power, and we must learn that we have power in our collective. And so I implore you, I encourage you to consider a wonderful way, a powerful way to celebrate Black History Month and to lift up the lives and legacies of our ancestors and those that have come before us by coming together and blacking out Black Friday on its last day. I'm Marcus Holmes. I hope you will click share and tag someone to watch this, to encourage them. I'm going to again put up the flyer for one quick second. Again, this is the Al Sharpton DEI boycott plan. I'm making some adjustments to it. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't make adjustments to it, but do something. Do something because you make a difference. And your message that you send to corporations and banks who care about their bottom lines, well, let's touch their bottom lines on Friday, February 28th. I want to thank all of you for joining. We'll close with a rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing that I absolutely love. And I want to thank you for joining.
Lift every voice and Yeah.